In the spring of 1909, a man named G. Kincaid paddled a wooden boat alone down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon and found a cave entrance cut into the canyon wall approximately 1,400 feet above the river. He was not supposed to be there. Not in the sense of trespassing. In the sense that the canyon at that depth, at that section of the river, was not on his survey route. He had drifted further downstream than his maps covered. He had run low on supplies. He was looking for a place to make camp above the waterline. What he found instead was a doorway. Not a natural cave opening. A doorway. With vertical sides and a horizontal lintel and a threshold worn smooth in a way that natural erosion does not produce but foot traffic does. He tied his boat, climbed the cliff face, entered the opening and spent 2 days inside before he came back out. What he reported when he reached Yuma, Arizona, and filed his account with the Smithsonian Institution's archaeologist on contract in the region, a man named S.A. Jordan, was the following. A tunnel extending horizontally into the canyon wall for a distance he estimated at nearly a mile. Chambers branching off the main passage at regular intervals. Stone tablets carved with symbols he could not read. Figures carved in relief on the passage walls. Figures that combined human and animal features in a way he said resembled nothing in any Native American artistic tradition he had previously encountered. Artifacts of copper and gold arranged on stone shelves. Mummified remains inside chambers, preserved by the extreme dryness of the interior, in the sitting position of the dead. And something else. A chamber at the far end of the main tunnel that he described in his initial account as containing an object he could not identify, made of a material he could not name, which produced in the surrounding air a quality of stillness he found difficult to describe but impossible to ignore. He described it as the silence of something that had been waiting. The account was published on the 9th of April, 1909, in the Arizona Gazette. Front page. Column 1. Under the headline, Explorations in Grand Canyon. Mysteries of immense rich cavern being brought to light. The article named Kincaid. It named Jordan. It named the Smithsonian Institution as the sponsoring body for the excavation that was now underway. 3 days after the article was published, the Smithsonian Institution issued a statement. They had no record of any employee or contractor named S.A. Jordan. They had no knowledge of any expedition to the Grand Canyon in the spring of 1909. They had no record of any discovery of the kind described in the Arizona Gazette article. The Smithsonian has maintained that position for 115 years. The article still exists. You can read it today. The Arizona Gazette archive has been digitized. Column 1, page 1, April 9, 1909. The names are there. The discovery is described in detail. And the institution named as the sponsor of the excavation says it has no idea what the article is referring to. Before we go any further, if institutional denial and suppressed discovery are what brought you here, subscribe and hit the notification bell now. This channel exists to document the cases the official record refuses to acknowledge. It costs you nothing. And every subscriber makes this work harder to ignore. Now let us talk about why the Hopi knew. Because the Hopi did know. And they said so long before 1909. Long before any European set foot in the Grand Canyon region. Long before the Colorado River was mapped. Long before anyone with a government contract and a wooden boat and a survey route floated down to that section of the river and found a doorway cut into the cliff. The Hopi people have lived in the high desert plateau north of the Grand Canyon for at least 1,000 years in their current locations. And their oral traditions describe continuous habitation of the broader region for far longer than that. Their origin stories, which are not casual mythology but carefully preserved historical accounts maintained by specific knowledge keeper lineages across generations, describe a world that exists beneath this one. Not metaphorically. Not as spiritual allegory. As a physical place. The Hopi call it the underworld, but the word they use, the word that is translated as underworld by English-speaking anthropologists, does not mean beneath the world in a spiritual sense. It means beneath the surface. The world below the ground. The world that was inhabited before the current world was inhabited. The place from which the Hopi people themselves emerged, according to their own account of their origins, through a passageway they call the Sipapu. The Sipapu is not a metaphor in Hopi tradition. It is a physical location. Hopi elders have identified it as being located in the Little Colorado River Gorge, which feeds into the main Colorado River Canyon approximately in the region where Kincaid reported finding his doorway. But the emergent story is only part of what Hopi tradition says about the tunnels. The other part is a warning. And the warning is specific. In the accounts collected by ethnographers who worked with Hopi knowledge keepers in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, accounts that are held in part at the Smithsonian's own National Anthropological Archives and in part at university collections in Arizona and New Mexico, the Hopi described the tunnels beneath the Grand Canyon region as inhabited. Not formerly inhabited. Not abandoned. Inhabited. By beings they identify as the Ant People, the same beings who sheltered the Hopi ancestors during the destruction of a previous world, underground until the surface was safe to return to. The Ant People description is consistent across accounts collected from different Hopi communities at different times by different researchers who had no contact with each other. The beings are described as small, thin-limbed, large-headed, with eyes adapted to darkness. They are described as having knowledge of things that the surface world does not have. They are described as neither friendly nor hostile but as deeply particular about who enters their domain and why. The warning the Hopi passed down was not do not go underground because it is dangerous in the way that caves are dangerous. The warning was do not go underground without permission because what is down there is not empty and what is down there does not welcome intrusion. That warning was given to Hopi children for centuries before Kincaid tied his boat to the canyon wall. The Smithsonian knew about it. They had collected the ethnographic accounts. They had cataloged the Hopi emergence narratives. They had received reports from field researchers describing the specific geographic location the Hopi identified as the Sipapu entrance. All of this material was in the Smithsonian's possession before 1909, which means that when G. Kincaid filed his account with S.A. Jordan in the spring of that year and the Smithsonian subsequently denied any knowledge of either man or either account, they were not simply denying one prospector's unusual story. They were denying a story that connected directly to an ethnographic record they had already collected and classified and placed beyond the reach of public access. The denial was not about Kincaid. The denial was about what Kincaid's account confirmed. Now let us talk about what is actually down there because the Grand Canyon is not simply a geological feature. It is one of the most archaeologically significant landscapes in North America, and the archaeology of its walls and chambers has been systematically controlled in a way that no other comparable site in the country has been. The canyon walls contain layers of geological time stretching back nearly 2 billion years. In those walls, at various depths and various locations, there are structures. Not natural formations. Structures. Rooms cut into the canyon wall. Passages extending horizontally into the rock. Storage chambers. Sites that show evidence of deliberate construction by human or human-adjacent hands at depths and in locations that the conventional archaeological timeline of the American Southwest cannot account for. Some of these are known. Some are documented. Some have been excavated and reported in limited academic publications. The ones that produce conventional findings, pottery shards, corn pollen, evidence of ancestral Puebloan occupation in the last 2,000 years, those findings are published normally and discussed openly. The ones that do not produce conventional findings are handled differently. A researcher named Jack Andrews, who worked as a field assistant on a Bureau of Land Management survey of the North Rim Canyon region in 1972, described in a privately published memoir from 1989 discovering a sealed passage in the canyon wall at approximately the same elevation Kincaid had described, in a section of the canyon accessible only by a technical rope descent from the rim. Andrews described the passage as sealed from the outside. Not collapsed. Not blocked by rockfall. Seal. With fitted stone placed deliberately to close the opening, in the same way that a doorway is bricked up rather than a tunnel caved in. He photographed it. He reported it to his BLM supervisor. His supervisor told him to note the location in the survey log and continue. When Andrews later requested a copy of the survey log entry to include in his memoir, the BLM told him the 1972 North Rim survey records had been transferred to a federal archive in Denver. The Denver archive told him the records were there but not currently accessible for routine requests. He was given a formal access request form. He submitted it. He received a response 11 months later informing him that the records in question had been reclassified as sensitive cultural resource materials under the National Historic Preservation Act and were not available to the public. The passage Andrews photographed is in those photographs, which he kept. The photographs are in his memoir, which was printed in a run of 300 copies and distributed primarily to regional bookshops in Arizona and New Mexico. It is not in any library catalog. The memoir has never been digitized. Andrews died in 2003. His family retained the printing plates. No second edition has been produced. 300 copies of a memoir describing a sealed passage in the Grand Canyon that the federal government classified as sensitive and removed from public access. That is how suppression works at the operational level. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just a reclassification form and an 11-month wait and a response letter that uses the word inaccessible instead of the word hidden. Now back to the Hopi warning. Because there is a specific detail in the ethnographic accounts that the 1909 Arizona Gazette article corroborates without appearing to know that it is corroborating anything. The Hopi accounts collected in the 1890s by an ethnographer named Alexander Stephen, who lived with the Hopi for many years and kept detailed journals of what he was told by knowledge keepers, described the underground chambers in the canyon region as containing tablets. Stone tablets inscribed with a record of what happened in the previous world, the world before this one, kept underground to preserve them from what destroyed the surface. Kincaid's 1909 account described stone tablets carved with symbols he could not read. Stephen died in 1894. His journals were held in private hands until they were edited and published in 1936. The 1909 Arizona Gazette article was published 15 years before Stephen's journals became publicly available. There is no path by which Kincaid could have read Stephen's accounts of Hopi tablet traditions and incorporated them into a fabricated story. Either Kincaid found what he said he found, or he independently invented a detail that matched the unpublished ethnographic record held in private hands. One of those two explanations is plausible. The Hopi warning about the tunnels was not general. It was not a broad prohibition against cave exploration. It was specific to this canyon, this region, this system of passages. And the reason it was specific, according to the account Stephen collected, was that the Hopi knew from their own history what was in there. They had been down there. Their ancestors had come up from down there. They knew the chambers existed. They knew the tablets existed. They knew the beings that maintained the tunnels existed. And they had been told, by the beings themselves according to certain accounts, that the surface world and the world below were to be kept separate. Not because the beings below were hostile. Because the knowledge they held was not meant for the surface world until the surface world was ready for it. The Hopi did not say what ready meant, or when it might occur, or what the sign of readiness would look like. They said only that the warning stood until it was lifted. It has not been lifted. After the Smithsonian's denial of the 1909 story, the Arizona Gazette published no follow-up. The reporter who wrote the original article, whose byline does not appear on the piece, was never publicly identified. Kincaid's name appears in the article and nowhere else in any public record before or after. There is no record of his birth, his death, his other surveys, or his presence in Arizona before the spring of 1909. He appeared, filed his account, gave his name to a newspaper, and then ceased to exist in any archive. S.A. Jordan, the Smithsonian archaeologist named as coordinating the excavation, similarly leaves no trace before or after 1909. No academic record. No publication list. No correspondence file. No employment record at the Smithsonian of any kind. Two men who do not exist, describing a discovery that did not happen, in a newspaper article that still exists and can be read by anyone who wants to read it. The Grand Canyon today is one of the most visited national parks in the United States. 5 million people walk its rim every year. They look down at the canyon walls. They take photographs. They buy postcards. They read the official signage that describes the geology and the ancestral Puebloan habitation history and the formation of the canyon over millions of years. None of the official signage mentions the Hopi warning. None of it mentions the 1909 article. None of it mentions the sealed passage photographed in 1972 and classified as sensitive cultural resource material. None of it mentions the underground world that the Hopi have described in consistent detail for centuries, the physical place beneath the canyon floor, the chambers, the tablets, the beings, the knowledge that is being kept below the surface until the surface world is ready to receive it. The Hopi were not warning explorers away from a dangerous cave. They were warning them away from something that had been placed there deliberately. Something that was being maintained. Something that would still be there, in the same chambers, behind the same sealed doorways, when the explorers were long gone and forgotten. In 1909, a man named Kincaid found one of those doorways. He went in. He came back out and filed a report. The report was denied. The doorway was sealed again. And beneath the most visited canyon in America, in passages that no official map acknowledges and no public agency discusses, whatever Kincaid described in that article is still there. Still waiting. Still in that quality of stillness he could not describe but could not ignore. The Hopi knew it would be. They had always known.